A line across a map looks simple. This conflict burns through lines. The Arab-Israeli struggle refuses neat endings because it feeds on something older than treaties and tougher than borders. It sinks roots into scripture and stone, into graves and holy days, into the way memory clings like dust to a pilgrim's sandals. People describe it as a land dispute. It operates more like a collision of calendars and covenants, unhealed traumas, and sacred vows. That is the first uncomfortable truth. Modern papers keep trying to quiet a story that began long before the ink. Walk the limestone alleys of Jerusalem at dawn, and the argument breathes in the stones. Genesis opens with calls to a wandering shepherd who looked up at stars over Canaan, a promise in the night sky that his descendants would become as countless as those lights. The Hebrew Bible then traces a people's home, tribes, judges, kings, the temple rising and collapsing, exiles, returns. Israelites and Judahites move from tent to city, from David's harp to Nehemiah's wall. Prophets frame the land, not only as soil, but as stage. Covenant kept, covenant broken, covenant renewed. The Book of 2 Kings records the Assyrian destruction of the northern kingdom around 722 BCE. Jeremiah and Ezekiel lament the Babylonian destruction in 586 BCE, describing Jerusalem's fall in ash and lamentation. Then comes the Persian edict around 538 BCE under Cyrus the Great that names a return and a rebuilding, chronicled at the starts of Ezra and Nehemiah. That arc imprints something enduring. A people tied to a place by divine story, law, and language. Centuries roll. The Second Temple glows against the hill until Roman legions break it in the year 70 CE. Josephus writes of fires and desperate defense. The Roman Empire renames Judea as Syria, Palestina, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, 135 CE, a rebranding that tries to uproot a name from history. Exile swells far beyond Babylon and Egypt to Iberia, the Rhineland, the Maghreb, Yemen, and beyond. Yet Jewish prayer circles back. The Passover table closes with "Next year in Jerusalem," a line repeated for 2 millennia, stitched into liturgy, whispered in ghettos and deserts. A dispersed people carries a portable nap locked in prayer, fasting each year on Tisha B'Av to mourn both temples' destructions and a cascade of catastrophes. But the land does not empty. Samaritans remain. Christian pilgrims arrive as the early church spreads. In the 7th century, Arab-Muslim armies sweep across the Levant. Jerusalem becomes Al-Quds. The Dome of the Rock gleams with Quranic script by the end of the 7th century, and Al-Aqsa becomes the 3rd holiest mosque in Islam. The Quran acknowledges sacred ties to Abraham and his descendants, and Islam weaves the land into its own sacred geography. Crusaders raise banners. Saladin returns it to Muslim rule in 1187 under the Ayyubids. Mamluks follow. The Ottomans rule steadily from 1517 to 1917, leaving tax registers, waqf deeds, and networks of villages and orchards. Christian and Muslim families, Arabic-speaking Jews, in cities like Hebron, Jerusalem, and Safed, and incoming European Jews all coexist in varying arrangements across centuries. No empty land waits. No single claim sleeps. This thicker timeline carries the first reason resolution slips away. Compromise falls apart when ground turns into scripture and scripture turns into identity. Not all disputes involve verses, martyrs, and holy stones. This one does. Each season of negotiation cuts across a sacred map that neither side truly drew, and neither believes it can erase without erasing itself. Fast forward to the late 19th century. The modern world collides with this ancient one. Pogroms rip through the Russian Empire in the 1880s. Political nationalism defines the age, and Zionism organizes an old longing into a new program. Theodor Herzl writes Der Judenstaat in 1896, suggesting a political solution to a problem older than politics. Zionist congresses gather in Basel in 1897. Jewish immigrants begin to arrive in greater numbers, building agricultural settlements, like Petah Tikva, founded 1878, and Degania, 1909, reviving Hebrew as a daily language, buying land through organizations like the Jewish National Fund, established in 1901. Meanwhile, Arab societies in late Ottoman Palestine evolve their own national consciousness in conversation with a broader Arab awakening, asserting connection to the land through centuries of family, village, and prayer. Ottoman censuses and British surveys record a patchwork of cities, villages, and clans, with fields of wheat, tobacco, and olives stretching under the sun. Then World War I shreds empires. General Allenby enters Jerusalem in December 1917. That same year, the Balfour Declaration voices British support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine while promising the rights of existing non-Jewish communities. The 1916 Hussein McMahon Correspondence nurtures Arab expectations for independence. The 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement draws imperial lines with a ruler across the Levant. Promises pile on promises. By 1922, the League of Nations grants Britain a mandate over Palestine with a built-in contradiction: facilitate a Jewish national home while safeguarding the civil and religious rights of all inhabitants. It reads like a recipe for permanent tension. The 1920s and 30s grow hotter. Riots in 1920, 1921, and 1929 flare, including violence near the Western Wall and in Hebron, where an ancient Jewish community faces massacre in 1929. The Arab Revolt from 1936 to 1939 strikes at British rule and Zionist immigration, an uprising rooted in fear of land loss, political marginalization, and demographic change. Britain's 1939 White Paper sharply limits Jewish immigration, a decision that collides tragically with the Holocaust's approach. By 1945, 6 million Jews are dead. Survivors search for life and safety. Many look toward Palestine. Tensions spiral as clandestine immigration challenges British quotas, underground Jewish groups bomb British targets, and Arab leaders warn that new arrivals threaten their homeland. The British refer the problem to the United Nations. In November 1947, the UN General Assembly passes Resolution 181 recommending partition. 2 states, 1 Jewish and 1 Arab, with Jerusalem as a corpus separatum under international administration. Jewish leaders accept the plan despite painful borders. Arab leaders reject it as unjust, creating a new state for immigrants while dividing Arab towns and farmlands. Violence erupts in civil war between communities across 1947 and early 1948. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declares the State of Israel. Hours later, armies from Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon move in. The 1948 1949, war reshapes the map and the memory of millions. Israel survives and expands beyond the UN plan's borders. Jordan takes the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Egypt takes Gaza. Armistice lines in 1949, green pencil strokes on white paper, become de facto boundaries. Palestinians experience the Nakba, a catastrophe of dislocation. More than 700,000 Palestinians flee or are expelled from homes. Hundreds of villages are depopulated. Israel absorbs Jewish refugees from Arab countries by the hundreds of thousands in the early 1950s as well, uprooted by street violence, legal pressure, and state policies across Iraq, Yemen, Egypt, Libya, and more. Two peoples swap centuries of rootedness for new and uneasy homes. Property deeds, iron keys, and family photos become heirlooms of absence. This is the second reason resolution slips away. Memory organizes political life. On one side, a national rebirth after near annihilation proves that survival demands sovereign control, borders, and an army. On the other side, a searing dispossession demands return, restitution, and dignity. Each story looks in the mirror and sees justice. Each suspects that the other's justice cancels its own. Wars return. In 1956, after Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalizes the Suez Canal, Israel marches into Sinai alongside Britain and France. International pressure, primarily from the U.S. and USSR, forces a withdrawal. A decade later, May-June 1967 turns feverish with Egyptian troop movements into Sinai, a Cairo blockade of the Straits of Tiran, mutual defense pacts, and electric speeches. In 6 days that June, Israel seizes the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza from Egypt, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. The Western Wall comes back into Jewish hands for the first time in nearly 2 millennia. Moshe Dayan announces that Muslim control of the Haram al-Sharif will remain under the Islamic Waqf, managed by Jordan, a fragile status quo, allowing worship for Muslims and visits for others without public Jewish prayer. The UN Security Council passes Resolution 242, laying out the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war and calling for withdrawal from territories occupied and for the right of every state in the area to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries. The phrasing ignites arguments for decades with its deliberate ambiguity over the territories. Israel's stunning victory creates new dilemmas. The occupation of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and Gaza places millions of Palestinians under Israeli control. Israel begins establishing settlements, initially for security and ideology, then increasingly for demographics and theology. Gush Emunim emerges in 1974, mixing nationalism with scriptural inheritance. Over time, roads and hilltops fill. East Jerusalem is annexed under Israeli law in 1980. Israel passes a basic law declaring Jerusalem, complete and united, is the capital of Israel, prompting UN Security Council Resolution 478 condemning the move and urging diplomatic withdrawal from the city. In 1973, on Yom Kippur, Egypt and Syria strike. Israel reels, then recovers. The shock forces rethinking. Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat sign peace at Camp David in 1978. A full treaty follows in 1979. Israel returns the Sinai in stages, evacuating settlements like Yamat in 1982. Later, Jordan signs a peace treaty with Israel in 1994. Two neighbors drop out of the war loop. The core issue remains. The late 1980s intensify. In December 1987, the First Intifada ignites. Stone-throwing youths, mass protests, strikes, and civil disobedience. An uprising, largely grassroots, spreads through refugee camps and towns. Israel responds with curfews, arrests, and force. The uprising reshapes international consciousness and Palestinian politics. The PLO, long in exile, declares a Palestinian state in November 1988 and signals openness to a two-state idea, referencing UN resolutions. Secret channels opened by the early 1990s, helped by the end of the Cold War, the 1991 Madrid Conference, and Norwegian mediators. September 13, 1993, the White House lawn. Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat shake hands with President Bill Clinton between them. The Oslo Accords established the Palestinian Authority, envisage phased Israeli withdrawals, set up areas A, B, and C in the West Bank, and push final status issues, Jerusalem, borders, settlements, refugees, security, into later negotiations. Arafat returns to Gaza and Jericho in 1994. That same year, Jordan and Israel sign a peace treaty. Hope jumps like a spark in a dry field, but sparks meet winds. A Jewish extremist murders 29 Muslim worshippers in Hebron during Ramadan in 1994. Hamas and Islamic Jihad carry out suicide bombings in Israeli cities, splitting the Israeli public. In November 1995, Rabin is assassinated by a Jewish nationalist. Later attempts at diplomacy stumble. The 2000 Camp David summit ends without agreement. The failure bleeds into the Second Intifada after Ariel Sharon visits the Temple Mount Haram al-Sharif in late September 2000. Violence surges. Bus bombings, shootings, Israeli-targeted killings, reoccupation of West Bank cities, and layers of despair. The death toll climbs on both sides. Israel begins constructing a separation barrier, which Israel calls a security fence and Palestinians call an apartheid wall. Data show dramatic reductions in suicide bombings. Palestinians experience land fragmentation and daily obstacles to movement. In 2004, the International Court of Justice issues an advisory opinion deeming the barrier illegal where it deviates into the West Bank. Israel argues security necessity and adjusts certain sections after Israeli Supreme Court rulings like Beit Sawarik, 2004, and Mareh, 2005. By 2005, Israel unilaterally disengages from Gaza under Ariel Sharon, evacuating about 8,000 settlers and all military bases there. The move shocks Israeli politics and redraws Gaza's internal life. In 2006, Hamas wins Palestinian legislative elections. In 2007, after violent clashes with Fatah, Hamas seizes control of Gaza. The Palestinian polity splits. The West Bank comes under a weakened Palestinian Authority. Gaza becomes Hamas-held. Israel and Egypt, citing security concerns, tighten control over borders into Gaza. Rocket fire from Gaza escalates. Israeli airstrikes and incursions respond. Wars arrive in rounds. 2008-2009. Operation Cast Lead. 2012. Pillar of Defense. 2014. Protective Edge. 2021. Guardian of the Walls, and others. The human costs in Gaza and southern Israel are severe, with civilians bearing the brunt of a cycle that keeps returning. Israeli towns like Sderot, install playground bomb shelters. Gazans live with blackouts, unemployment, and claustrophobic borders. Iron Dome interceptors streak the night sky. Rockets and drones keep coming back. In the West Bank, settlement growth accelerates in both official settlements and unauthorized outposts that often receive retroactive approval. As of the early 2020s, estimates put around 465,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank, excluding East Jerusalem, and over 230,000 in East Jerusalem, totaling roughly 700,000. Palestinians in Area A administer city centers. Israel maintains overarching security control and full control over Area C, around 60% of the West Bank. Checkpoints, bypass roads, permits, and nightly raids define a reality that looks permanent. Meanwhile, Israeli Arabs, approximately 21% of Israel's citizens, live an ambivalent story, voting in Knesset elections, holding positions in medicine, law, and academia, yet facing discrimination and periodic eruptions of communal tension, such as in May 2021. October 7, 2023, cleaves another scar. Hamas militants. Militants breach Israeli borders, attacking southern communities, killing over 1,200 people in Israel, including civilians, and taking roughly 250 hostages into Gaza. Israel launches a massive war in Gaza. By 2024, Gaza's death toll, according to local health authorities, exceeds tens of thousands, with the enclave in rubble, a spiraling humanitarian crisis, and fierce international debate. Hostages remain in underground tunnels or hidden apartments. Families on both sides count days and names. In northern Israel, exchanges of fire with Hezbollah intensify. In April 2024, Iran sends drones and missiles toward Israel after an escalation tied to regional shadow wars, met by a multinational intercept. The conflict's front lines blur across maps and screens. What keeps this struggle from closing is not only violence, but the structure of the disagreement itself. The hardest issues resist arithmetic. Borders, the 1,949 armistice lines, the Green Line, became a reference point, then the imagined border for a two-state solution. Yet outposts and urban neighborhoods have woven the West Bank into the Israeli fabric. Palestinians view Area C as their land base. Israelis cite security depth and biblical heritage, especially in Judea and Samaria. E1. A strategic zone east of Jerusalem symbolizes whether a Palestinian state could be territorially contiguous. Land swaps became a common idea in late 1990 and early 2000s proposals. Implementation remains a mirage. Jerusalem, both call it capital. Jews tie identity to Mount Moriah and the Western Wall, crying on Tisha B'Av over the temples. Muslims tie identity to Al-Aqsa and the Haram al-Sharif, recalling the night journey. Christians cherish the Via Dolorosa and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The 1947 UN partition plan proposed internationalization. Later, ideas proposed divided sovereignty, special regimes, or functional arrangements over the old city. Each proposal hits a sacred tripwire. The 2018 moving of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem cements one diplomatic track. Palestinians see East Jerusalem as occupied since 1967, the natural capital of a future state. The status quo on the Haram Temple Mount is fragile and violently contested when rumors and visits shift atmospheres during holidays. Refugees. Roughly 5.9 million Palestinians are registered with UNRWA across the region. Palestinians assert a right of return rooted in UN General Assembly Resolution 194, 1,948, and in social and moral claims. Israel sees mass return as demographic erasure of Jewish self-determination, offering instead resettlement, limited family reunification, and compensation. Negotiations like the 2000-2001 Clinton parameters and the 2003 Geneva Initiative proposed recognizing suffering, limited returns, and compensation funds. No handshake sealed it. Palestinian refugees keep keys. Israeli families keep land deeds restored under the 1,950 law of return. Each key opens a different locked door. Security. Israelis remember 1,948's precariousness, 1,967's encirclement, suicide bombings, and rockets. Palestinians remember round-the-clock military law, raids, closures, and deaths without recourse. Israelis champion demilitarization and prolonged security control of strategic valleys like the Jordan Valley. Palestinians see that as indefinite occupation by another name. Gaza's reality hardens Israeli consensus that withdrawals without ironclad security arrangements can lead to worse fire. Palestinians agree that prison without exit breeds radicalization, recognition. Israel insists on recognition as the nation-state of the Jewish people, arguing that this closes the book on future claims. Palestinians insist on equal dignity without preemptively ceding refugee claims or minority rights. Israelis hear existential denial in hedged recognition language. Palestinians hear demands for surrender beyond international law's baseline. Even the wording of preambles becomes landmine territory. Beneath those headline issues lies a psychology of intractability. Researchers like Daniel Bartal write about societal beliefs of conflict that become identity-defining. Scott Atran and Jeremy Ginges describe sacred values that resist trade-offs. Offering money for them often backfires and hardens positions. In this conflict, both sides tether their stance to sacred narratives and existential frames. Sacred values don't respond to price. They respond to respect, ritual, and moral framing. This is why philanthropies can fund technical success in water treatment while negotiations drown in symbolism. Trauma also changes the chemistry of politics. On the Israeli side, memories of the Shoah and of repeated wars yield a doctrine of vigilance. Never again, which manifests in concrete policy and culture. On the Palestinian side, generational dispossession and daily friction with soldiers, checkpoints, and legal limbo create a lived memory of humiliation and injury. Nakba not as past, but as present continuous. Traumatized groups often become time travelers. They relive old dangers in new events. Safety becomes non-negotiable. Dignity becomes non-negotiable. Each sees the other's security doctrine as domination. Each sees the other's claim to dignity as a claim on its throat. The demography and governance story compounds the stalemate. Inside Israel, different communities hold overlapping but distinct visions, secular liberals staking identity in democracy and law, national religious settlers grounding claims in covenant and history, ultra-Orthodox communities focused on religious autonomy and wary of army service, Arab citizens balancing identity and belonging. The 2023 mass protests over judicial overhaul exposed intense internal rifts that the 2023-2024 war then postponed, but did not erase. On the Palestinian side, leadership is split between the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah and Hamas in Gaza. Aging leadership and stalled elections, none held nationally since 2006 siphoned legitimacy. Security coordination with Israel, while reducing violence in the West Bank, corrodes public trust. Corruption scandals and institutional paralysis fray the Palestinian social contract. Gaza's isolation fuels an economy of tunnels, smuggling, and survival. Donor fatigue and political fatigue set in. Internationally, an alphabet soup of initiatives. Roadmap, 2003. Arab Peace Initiative, 2002. Quartet Statements. Geneva Initiative, 2003. Annapolis, 2007. Kerry Talks, 2013-2014. Generate communicates and photo ops but rarely change life at the checkpoint or the rocket's flight path. International law and diplomacy provide structure and friction. The UN Security Council's Resolution 242 and 338 set the withdrawal for peace framework. Later resolutions condemn settlements and violence. The International Court of Justice issued a 2004 advisory opinion on the barrier. The International Criminal Court announced in 2021 an investigation into the situation. In 2024, the ICC prosecutors sought arrest warrants for leaders from both Hamas and Israel. Legal narratives become ammunition. Each side points to legal documents as shields, while de facto facts on the ground reshape reality faster than filings can catch up. Economics and ecology weave themselves into the stalemate. Israel's GDP per capita rockets past $50,000, high-tech booms in Tel Aviv and Herzliya. The Palestinian economy remains aid-dependent, vulnerable to closures, and strangled by lack of control over borders, resources, and planning. Gaza's unemployment has hovered around or above 40% for years. Water, the mountain aquifer, and the Jordan River serve as lifelines bound in technical committees and lopsided access. Oslo II Annex III created a joint water committee. Desalination and wastewater treatment have improved some metrics, but sewage spills, aquifer salinity in Gaza, and infrastructure bombings keep water anxiety simmering. Even when engineers cooperate, politics can scorch the pipes. Social media algorithms tilt the battlefield. Videos of funerals, raids, rockets, and ruins go viral in minutes, flattening context and inflaming outrage. Diaspora activism. BDS calls since 2005 anti-BDS legislation across dozens of U.S. states. Competing definitions of anti-Semitism like IHRA and JDA turn campuses and boardrooms into proxies. The side effect is performative politics that rewards purity over compromise. Politicians in Washington, Brussels, Riyadh, Tehran, Cairo, and Doha treat the conflict as both policy and symbol, toggling support to domestic needs. Regional alignments shift. 2020's Abraham Accords with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan break the old linkage of Palestinian progress to Arab normalization with Israel. Yet, they do not remove the core grievance. Saudi-Israel normalization glimmers, dims, and flickers with conditions and crises. Hezbollah's arsenal lodges in the north. Syria's ruins and the North Reach turn the conflict into a chessboard layered over a minefield. Layer by layer, the reasons compound. Asymmetry and simultaneity. One side holds state power, a military and international recognition. The other holds mass displacement, limited sovereignty, and fragmented leadership. One fights to preserve. One fights to reverse. Negotiations must operate across plural clocks and unequal capacities. Settlements like facts too permanent to trade. Over decades, settlers built schools, synagogues, and towns. Outposts sprout on hilltops overnight. Palestinian villages expand, but face demolitions over lack of permits in Area C, where permitting is rare. Maps calcify into claims, claims into non-negotiable neighborhoods. Holy ground as an accelerant. The Haram al-Sharif temple mounts status quo is defined by unwritten protocols and brittle rhythms. Ramadan, overlapping with Passover or Jerusalem Day, can ignite confrontations. Rumors spread instantly. Crowds gather within minutes. A spark in a holy courtyard becomes flames across continents. Leadership incentives skewed toward caution or defiance, not risk. Leaders who gamble on peacemaking often pay a political or even mortal price. Rabin's assassination in 1995 stands as a warning in Israel's memory. Within Palestinian politics, collaboration is branded betrayal, while uncompromising defiance can win respect, even without results. The vocabulary of victory. Each side tells young people a story that affirms endurance and righteousness. Narratives rarely add the other's pain without flinching. Education systems, rituals, national holidays, Israel's Independence Day, Palestinian Nakba Day, train memory. Memory guards identity. Identity resists compromise. If closure looks distant, management reasserts itself. The system tends toward truces rather than treaties, ceasefires rather than covenants. Security coordination in the West Bank restrains violence. Qatari cash stipends have stabilized Gaza at points. Egyptian intermediaries broker pauses. Agencies move food and medicine. NGOs fill potholes and patch roofs. The status quo masquerades as stability. Then a flare in Jerusalem or Gaza or Jenin or Nablus reveals the status quo as a misreading of pressure, not a plan. Ideas circulate that try to bypass choke points. Confederation proposals suggest 2 states, 1 homeland, allowing dual residency, Israeli settlers remaining under Israeli sovereignty while inside Palestinian territory, and Palestinian refugees gaining residency in Israel without full political membership. One-state visions, trade sovereignty splits for equal rights under a single government. Opponents call that a recipe for endless gridlock or permanent strife. Limited autonomy plans promise greater Palestinian self-rule without full statehood. Opponents call that dressed-up apartheid. The 2002 Arab Peace Initiative offers comprehensive normalization with Israel or full withdrawal and a just and agreed-upon solution to refugees. It stays on the shelf, referenced, rarely implemented. The 2020 Peace to Prosperity Plan under the Trump administration sketches annexation corridors. Palestinians reject it. Israel pauses formal annexation while normalizing with Gulf states. Proposals keep tracing lines. Reality keeps redrawing them. Inside daily life, countercurrents whisper. Israeli and Palestinian doctors cooperate in hospitals, saving infants regardless of passport. Tech entrepreneurs build apps that ignore checkpoints on screens, even if not on roads. Shared environmental projects quietly heal aquifers. Bilingual schools teach children 2 languages and 2 anthems. The Abraham Accords open direct flights, medical collaborations, and business deals across the region. Arab citizens of Israel serve in hospitals curing COVID-19 patients and in courts interpreting law. These stories often vanish under the noise, resurfacing in profile pieces or documentaries, then receding again when sirens wail. October 2023 and its aftermath rewire hope circuits. Hostage families camp outside government buildings in Tel Aviv, projecting photos onto towers. In Gaza, mothers cradle rationed water and missing sons. In the West Bank, raids and shootings multiply. Settler-Palestinian village clashes spike. Jewish-Arab city relations inside Israel strain. In regional waters, Houthi attacks in the Red Sea touch global trade. Normalization talks twist around conditions. International campuses and parliaments fill with chants and counter-chants. An information war runs concurrent with the shooting war, twisting facts into weapons and empathy into scarcity. The hardest layer involves moral arithmetic that refuses tidy solutions. Israelis point to a 3,000-year record of presence, prayer, and return, to the Shoah as evidence that powerlessness courts death, to regional hostility and direct attacks as proof that concessions can become launchpads. Palestinians point to 75 years of statelessness since 1948 to military rule and settlements since 1967 to a life lived under permit regimes and periodic bombardment, to bulldozed homes and blocked futures. Neither ledger erases the other. Each insists on being seen. Legal terms like occupation, disputed territories, and right of return do heavy work. Each term implies a verdict. Even neutral words carry weight. Security barrier softens. Wall hardens. Samaria suggests Bible. Northern West Bank suggests modern geography. Language becomes a front line, translating into policy, then into bulldozers and checkpoints. Time conspires too. Demographics indicate young populations. The median age in the West Bank and Gaza is roughly in the early 20s. In Israel, it hovers in the early 30s. Youth rarely remember a pre-Intifada world of relative openness or an Oslo spring. They grow up in the shadow of sirens and soldiers, on-feed streaming rage in HD. Their first political education arrives via trauma scrolls. External actors keep 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Iran funds and arms proxies like Hezbollah and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Qatar finances. Gaza salaries and hosts talks. Egypt controls Rafah and brokers ceasefires. Jordan manages the Islamic Waqf in Jerusalem, while guarding its own delicate demographic and security interests. Saudi Arabia wields leverage through potential normalization. The United States supplies Israel with aid and diplomatic cover, while funding the PA's security apparatus and UN agencies, pivoting tactically with each administration's doctrine. Europe debates boycotts and arms sales. Russia and China appear as opportunistic, occasionally mediating presences. Everyone is in. No one is fully in. The 2018 Basic Law, Israel as the nation-state of the Jewish people, codifies national self-determination as unique to the Jewish people, formalizing debates about equality and identity. Palestinians inside Israel hear that law as demotion. Israeli courts grapple with challenges. In the West Bank, legal debates over outposts, land ownership, and military orders produce rulings and reversals. The 2017 regularization law struck down by Israel's High Court in 2020. Subsequent policies attempt different legal routes for authorization. In Palestinian politics, the 2017 Hamas policy document reframes language without renouncing core stances, talks about a state on 1,967 lines without recognizing Israel, and continues to emphasize armed struggle. The PA continues security cooperation even through public outcry. Municipal services function, then falter. In Gaza, tunnels grow, then collapse under bombardment. Civil society adapts, then exhausts. Elections appear on calendars, then disappear. Each postponement chips away at legitimacy. Meanwhile, life whirs. Weddings in Ramallah feature Dabti lines and fireworks. Weddings in Tel Aviv spill onto beaches after midnight. Funerals move through alleys. Teenagers sneak out to the sea. Merchants in Hebron open steel shutters. Jerusalem shopkeepers arrange pomegranates. Soldiers play guitar on bass. Kids trade soccer stickers. Normalcy threads through tension, then snaps. The rhetorical thunder of final status drowns a quieter truth. Most conflicts end not with signed finales, but with layered arrangements that dull pain without curing it. In this place, every attempt to dull the pain creates a bruise elsewhere. The separation barrier reduces bombings but slices farmland. Checkpoints catch weapons, and capture suspects, but strangle livelihoods. Military raids arrest plotters and also ignite new vows of revenge. Gaza's tunnel economy keeps salaries paid and also funds war. Aid flows keep people alive and also entrench political stagnation. Every lever operates in two directions. A prediction emerges from that pattern. The conflict persists not because people love it, but because the systems around it reward its persistence. Parties win elections vowing to be tougher. Donors write checks to rebuild what will need rebuilding again. Factions recruit on fresh funerals. Diplomats draft communiques. Sacred time overrides policy. The diaspora magnifies it. Every holiday season, Passover, Ramadan, Easter, puts the holy city under a global lens. Every war surfaces debates on campuses from New York to London to Johannesburg. The conflict sits at the crossroads of three monotheisms and modern geopolitics. That crossroads was not designed for quick traffic, and yet reality keeps sketching patterns that both doom and stabilize. Israel's military dominance and diplomatic ties produce a ceiling under which the state endures. Palestinian demography and rootedness produce a floor under which erasure does not occur. The result has often been prolonged stalemate punctuated by surges of violence and spurts of pragmatic cooperation. Water committees meet in drab rooms even as politicians spar on air. On the ground, humanitarian networks operate along lines the maps pretend don't exist. International mediators fly in with talking points. Deals form in side corridors. Breakdowns in plenary halls. Attempts to change the math through force rarely stay changed. Israel's 1,982 invasion of Lebanon intended to uproot the PLO and reshape the Northern Front. Hezbollah eventually formed as a more potent adversary. Hamas's October 2023 attack intends to reshape the Palestinian file and regional calculus. It unleashes ferocious retaliation and isolates Gaza, with reconstruction and reconciliation even more remote. External frontline shifts, like normalization with the UAE, alter incentive structures, but not the deadlock at the heart of Jerusalem, Hebron, Nablus, Gaza City, and Lod. Within faith communities, ancient texts remain alive. Isaiah envisions swords beaten into plowshares. The Quran teaches justice and mercy in equal measure. The Gospels outline blessings for peacemakers. Those words sit on shelves next to security doctrines and legal treatises. People reach for them in eulogies and in protests. Activists quote prophets at checkpoints. Soldiers slip psalms into flak vests. Sacred texts here have been used to justify courage and to rationalize cruelty. Texts alone do not resolve the conflict. The hearts that interpret them do. Property laws, cadastral surveys, and Ottoman-era records inject practical quagmires. In Jerusalem's Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan neighborhoods, long-simmering property claims ignite protests and evictions. In Hebron's Old City, layered sovereignties play out on staircases. In Area C, demolition orders for illegal construction meet accusations of an impossible permitting regime. On the Israeli side, families recall long-ignored Jewish trusts predating 1948. On the Palestinian side, families hold British Mandate deeds and Ottoman tapu documents. Courts, both Israeli and international, wade into centuries of paperwork, where politics sets the tide. Public opinion surveys capture contradictions. Polls often find majorities supporting a two-state solution in principle, then rejecting concrete compromises on Jerusalem, refugees, and settlements. Support dips with each burst of violence, recovers slightly and pauses, then dips again. Trust is cyclical, like seasons, and each winter feels longer. Younger cohorts on both sides grow more skeptical. They elect leaders accordingly. When leaders hint at compromise, they face credible threats from flanks that label compromise betrayal. The good faith impulse insists on solutions. Water-sharing pacts expanded, desalination scaled up. Freedom of movement traded for verifiable disarmament. Jerusalem as an open city, with shared sovereignty by neighborhood, refugee compensation and limited return tied to international funds and cross-border housing projects. Settlements concentrated into blocks with swaps. Isolated outposts evacuated with real compensation. A regional security umbrella backing demilitarization. Incitement undone by curriculum exchange programs measured by independent auditors. These are not fantasies. They are policy papers on shelves, pilgrimaging from conference to conference with graphs and annexes, but the atmosphere needed to implement them rarely forms. Elections swing. A stabbing punctures a pause. A police raid in a holy month curdles a compromise. A rocket barrage wipes out months of slow build. An attack in a settlement bypass road provokes a punitive rampage by vigilantes. Micro-escalations become macro stories. Trust, more fragile than glass, shatters faster than anyone can sweep. This is why the safer bet describes conflict management instead of conflict resolution. The phrase tastes like ash, but it matches the pattern. Periodic calm, enforced by deterrence, and by deals that will not be memorialized in the city squares. Humanitarian bandages laid over open political wounds. Rituals of diplomacy repeated for their calming effect, not because they heal. The alternative, efforts to smash the conflict into endgame through force, keeps producing humanitarian disasters and hardened positions. The religious layer circles back like a refrain. Genesis tells of a promise and a test. The Quran speaks of trust and stewardship. The prophets insist that justice and righteousness are the measure of blessing in a land. Rabbis and sheiks and priests have, at times, worked quietly to build shared norms around holy sites. Agreements exist that keep daily prayer rhythms from clashing. Small circles of clerics broker courtesy at funerals and weddings that cross communal lines. Those efforts are rarely televised. They are part of the reason the city's miracle, the simultaneous hum of synagogue, mosque, and church, still exists more days than it burns. The phrase, never resolved, does not mean never changed. The conflict has changed often. The camps have relocated. Borders have shifted. Peace treaties that seemed impossible with Egypt and Jordan exist and endure. The PLO once rejected Israel's existence. Now it coordinates security in the West Bank and signs agreements. Israeli politics once revolved around labor, then Likud, then fractal coalitions. The Arab world once boycotted wholly. Now embassies sit in Abu Dhabi and Manama with Israeli flags on desks. Change is not the same thing as closure. Closure requires a moral architecture both sides have resisted building, because building it would require each to engrave the other's story into its own, not as a footnote, but as a chapter. In the meantime, cemeteries expand. Schools hold emergency drills. Journalists arrive with flak jackets and leave with notebooks of sorrow. Tourists still buy postcards. The sea pounds Ashkelon's breakwater and Gaza's coast with the same waves. Spring announces itself with almond blossoms in Galilee and the Judean hills. Olive harvests return each autumn, interrupted by clashes and resumed by stubborn farmers under watchtowers' gaze. Life refuses to surrender even as politics keeps demanding it. The core of it is hard to admit. Peace that feels fair to both sides demands each to lose a piece of itself that it currently considers essential. Israelis would have to risk living next to a sovereign Palestine with limited control over what happens on that border and above that airspace, trusting that the logic of rockets could be replaced by the logic of roads and trade. Palestinians would have to accept that the return promised in ancestral stories will not happen in the way their grandparents imagined, and that a flag over a capital in East Jerusalem, a passport with recognition, and compensation funds expect to take the place of a specific key in a specific door. Leaderships that can sell those losses and survive are rare. Societies that can metabolize those losses without tearing themselves apart are rarer. The land carries too much story per square kilometer for light endings. There is no real estate broker for memory. There is no customs agent for grief. And still, people wake up tomorrow. Commuters line Highway 1 between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, while muezzin calls and shofar blasts rise on different mornings. Fishermen on Gaza's coast check the day's restricted nautical miles posted by authorities. Settlers wait at bus stops. Palestinian laborers wait at checkpoints. A mother in Beersheba texts her son to pack a jacket before the bus. A father in Khan Yunis tells his daughter to grab the math book even if the school only opens 2 days a week. Rabbis prepare sermons. Imams draft khutbahs. Politicians draft talking points designed to withstand a news cycle. Diplomats book their next flight. The truth refuses to budge. The Arab-Israeli conflict outlived empires. It learned the habits of their bureaucracies and their myths. It intertwined 3 faiths and hundreds of tribes, clans, city councils, NGOs, militias, and armies. It endures because it operates not only at the level of policy, but also at the level of meaning. Until the meaning shifts, policy will cope rather than conquer. Meaning has shifted here before. Exiles ended. Empires left. New maps gained names. Holy places received new caretakers. Scripts changed on the coins. Those shifts took generations, not summits. They arrived through accumulation of marriages that crossed lines, of businesses that needed calm to flourish, of poets and preachers who found words that could praise God without cursing a neighbor. The same accumulation can, in time, change the chemistry again. It may not look like a handshake on a lawn. It may look like traffic moving smoothly around a mosque on Friday and a synagogue on Shabbat and a church on Sunday week after week, long enough that children find it boring. Until then, the story holds. A disagreement about land masquerades as a disagreement about lines. It is a disagreement about who gets to belong without apology in a place where everyone has been told to leave at least once. The reason it might never be resolved sits in that mirror, in the eyes of people who carry keys and prayer books and photographs of stone houses and charred bus stops. The walls are thick. The doors do open. The ones with hands on the handles are not ready to let go.